I never expected my life to unravel because of a plain white envelope. It was just sitting there on my doorstep, no return address, no markings, nothing but my name written in neat block letters. If I'd known what was inside, maybe I would have left it there. My name is Alara, and until that morning, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm the daughter of Grant and Celeste Winslow, founders of Winslow Wellness, and wife to Nolan Mercer, who runs our Denver branch. We were the perfect power couple, or at least that's what Forbes called us in their 30 Under 30 feature last year. I'd just gotten back from my morning run, still catching my breath in the elevator of our downtown Denver apartment building, when I saw it. The envelope was slightly crooked, like whoever delivered it had been in a hurry. I picked it up, thinking it was probably another wedding invitation or charity gala request. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences that made my stomach drop. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Check the company's financial records from the past 18 months, especially wire transfers to offshore accounts. Sometimes the people closest to us wear the best masks. I read it 3 times, my hand starting to shake. The paper felt heavy, expensive, not the kind you'd buy at Office Depot. Someone who knew what they were doing had sent this. My phone buzzed, making me jump. It was Nolan. Hey, beautiful, don't forget dinner with Mom and Tessa tonight. Mom's making her famous pot roast. I stared at his message, trying to reconcile my charming, successful husband with the implications in the letter. Nolan, who brought me coffee every morning and could make me laugh even during board meetings. Nolan, who my parents had practically adopted as their own son. Can't wait, I typed back, adding a heart emoji like I always did. My finger hovered over the send button before I added, love you. Inside our apartment, everything looked normal. Nolan's coffee mug was still in the sink, his tie from yesterday draped over a kitchen chair. But suddenly, all these familiar things felt like props in a play I didn't know I was part of. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up our company's financial records. As CFO, I had access to everything, but I rarely checked the Denver branch's details. I trusted Nolan to handle that. Now, looking at the numbers, something felt off. The totals added up, but there were small discrepancies in the reporting patterns. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother-in-law, Lorraine. Alara, dear, please remind Nolan to pick up wine for tonight. And wear that lovely blue dress I got you for Christmas. It photographs so well for the family album. I closed my eyes, remembering how Lorraine had accidentally tagged me in those family photos on Instagram 3 times. Always with captions about her successful power couple. She'd been pushing us to buy a bigger house, too. Something more fitting for the Winslow Mercer legacy. The front door opened, startling me. I quickly closed the financial records as Nolan walked in, looking perfectly put together in his tailored suit. You're home early, I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. Thought I'd surprise you. He smiled, that dimpled smile that still made my heart skip. Maybe we could grab lunch before heading to Mom's? I watched as he loosened his tie, noticing how his hand paused for just a second when he saw the envelope on the counter. It was so quick I almost missed it. Lunch sounds great, I said, standing up. Let me just change quickly. In our bedroom, I slipped the anonymous letter into my jewelry box. Whatever truth it held, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't trust anyone until I figured out what was really going on. Not even the man I'd promised to love forever. As I changed clothes, I could hear Nolan humming in the kitchen, probably making coffee like he always did. Everything seemed so normal, but that letter had cracked my perfect world like a hammer to glass. The question was, how deep did the cracks really go? Lorraine Mercer's house always reminded me of a museum, beautiful to look at but don't touch anything. I sat at her pristine dining room table, watching her arrange flowers while Nolan and Tessa argued about some childhood memory in the kitchen. The pot roast was getting cold, but nobody seemed to care. Alara, darling, Lorraine said, not looking up from her roses, have you given any thought to that waterfront property I mentioned? The realtor says it won't stay on the market long. I gripped my wine glass tighter. We're happy where we are, Lorraine. Happy. Tessa emerged from the kitchen, wine glass already empty. In that shoebox apartment? Please. The Winslow heiress should be living somewhere that matches her status. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Ask them about the Cayman Islands account. My hand started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Nolan appeared behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders. Everything okay, babe? Fine, I said, quickly locking my screen. Just work stuff. Speaking of work, Lorraine chimed in. Nolan tells me the Denver branch is exceeding all expectations. You must be so proud of your husband, Ilara. I forced a smile, remembering the financial discrepancies I'd spotted earlier. Very proud. Tessa snorted, pouring more wine. Must be nice, having everything handed to you. Some of us actually have to work for a living. Tessa, Lorraine warned, but her tone was indulgent, like a parent scolding a favorite child. What? We're family. We can be honest. Tessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. I mean, Ilara's trust fund alone could put Jackson through college twice over. Where is Jackson? I asked, desperate to change the subject. Upstairs, probably hacking the Pentagon. Tessa rolled her eyes. He's going through this weird computer phase. Nolan squeezed my shoulders. Maybe he could intern at Winslow this summer? In the IT department. Actually, I said, surprising myself, that might be a good idea. We could use someone with fresh eyes on our security systems. The room went quiet. Too quiet. I looked up to find Nolan and Lorraine exchanging a look I couldn't quite read. I don't think that's necessary, Lorraine said quickly. Jackson needs to focus on his studies. Right, Tessa. Tessa was staring at her phone, suddenly distracted. Did you see this? The Martinez family just announced their daughter's engagement. God, their ring photo probably costs more than my car. The Martinezes? Lorraine perked up. Nolan, didn't you meet with Robert Martinez last week about that investment opportunity? Just a casual lunch, Nolan said, but his hands tightened on my shoulders. I frowned. I didn't know you were meeting with investors. Oh, it's all very preliminary, Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. But speaking of investments, Ilara, I've been meaning to ask about increasing Nolan's stake in the company. After all, he's family now. My wine glass froze halfway to my lips. That would be a board decision, not mine. But surely your father would listen to you, Tessa pressed. I mean, you're his only heir. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. As I headed for the back patio, I heard footsteps behind me. But instead of Nolan, it was Jackson who appeared at my side. They're always like this, he said quietly, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. Pushing and planning. Sometimes I listen to them through the air vents. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? He glanced over his shoulder, then pulled out his phone. I have some recordings you might want to hear. But not here. Not now. Before I could respond, Nolan called from inside. Ilara? Mom's serving dessert. Jackson quickly stepped away, but not before whispering, check your email tonight. Use a private network. I walked back inside, my mind racing. Across the table, Lorraine was serving perfect slices of cheesecake while Tessa showed Nolan something on her phone, both of them laughing. Everything looked normal, polished, perfect. But now I knew, somewhere in this beautiful house, hidden behind expensive flowers and family photos, there were air vents that held secrets. And a teenager who knew how to find them. I waited until 3 a.m. to check Jackson's email. Nolan was sound asleep beside me, his breathing steady and familiar. The laptop screen cast a blue glow across our bedroom as I connected to a private VPN, just like Jackson had instructed. The audio files were labeled by date. I clicked on the oldest one first, my hands trembling as I put in my earbuds. The company's worth billions now, Lorraine's voice crackled through. And she's the only heir. We need to move faster. I'm doing my best, Mom, Nolan's voice replied. My stomach clenched. But the offshore transfers take time. We can't risk anyone noticing. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. The next recording was worse. Just get her to sign over more control. Tessa this time. She trusts you completely. It's almost pathetic. Nolan's laugh. That's what makes it so easy. My wedding ring felt like it was burning my finger. I slipped it off, placing it on the nightstand. Beside me, Nolan stirred but didn't wake. The final recording was from last week. The Martinez deal could expose everything. Lorraine again. We need to move the money now, before Grant Winslow starts asking questions. I shut the laptop, my mind racing. The Martinez deal, the same one Nolan had dismissed as just lunch. I grabbed my phone, pulled up our banking app, and logged into my personal account. The balance looked normal, but something made me check the transaction history. There it was. Small transfers, nothing suspicious on their own, but they added up to millions over the past year. All going to an account I didn't recognize. Can't sleep? I nearly dropped my phone. Nolan was awake, watching me with those eyes I used to trust completely. Just checking some work stuff, I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. He reached for me, but I stood up. I need water. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter to stop my hands from shaking. My phone buzzed, another anonymous message. Check his laptop. Password, Tessa J, 2006. I glanced back toward the bedroom. Nolan had fallen asleep again. His laptop was in his briefcase by the door. The password worked. Inside, I found a folder labeled Personal. My heart pounding, I clicked through documents, bank statements, transfer records, emails between Nolan and his family discussing their plans, and photos. So many photos of Nolan with other women, in hotels I recognized from his business trips. Find what you're looking for? I spun around. Nolan stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the darkness. How long? I asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. My voice cracked. It matters to my father, whose company you've been stealing from. He stepped closer. Your father's company? You mean the one you inherited just because you were born a Winslow? Some of us had to work for what we wanted. By stealing? By lying. I backed away, clutching his laptop. Was any of it real? His expression softened. Of course it was real. I love you, Ilera. But love doesn't pay for the life we deserve. The life we deserve? I laughed bitterly. Or the life your mother demands? His face hardened. You don't understand. You've never had to prove yourself worthy of anything. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jackson. Get out now. Mom and Tessa are on their way over. They know you know. I'm calling my father, I said, reaching for my phone. Nolan moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist. You can't do that. Let go of me. Just listen. His voice was urgent now. We can fix this. Together. I'll show you everything, explain everything. Just don't make that call. The front door buzzed. Lorraine's voice came through the intercom. Nolan? Ilera? Open up, dears. We need to talk. I looked at my husband, this man I thought I knew, and saw a stranger. Behind his desperation, I finally saw the truth. I was never anything more than a means to an end. You're right, I said quietly. We do need to talk. All of us. I picked up my phone, starting with my father. The look on Nolan's face told me everything I needed to know about what would happen next. The morning after discovering Nolan's betrayal, I found myself sitting in my father's office, staring at the family photos on his desk. My hands were steady now, but my voice wasn't. Someone's been accessing our offshore accounts, I said, sliding Nolan's laptop across the desk. And it wasn't just company money. They got into my personal accounts too. Dad's face hardened as he scrolled through the files. How long have you known? Since last night. I twisted my now empty ring finger. Nolan's mother and sister are involved too. They've been planning this for years. The door opened and my mother rushed in. Grant, the board members are here. They're asking about the Martinez deal. What Martinez deal? I asked. Dad and Mom exchanged looks. Robert Martinez called this morning, Dad said carefully. Apparently, Nolan offered to sell him controlling interest in our Denver operations, using your voting shares as collateral. The room spun. He can't do that. I never signed anything. Actually, Mom pulled out a document. According to this, you did. 3 months ago. I grabbed the paper, my blood running cold. The signature looked exactly like mine, down to the way I crossed my T's. My phone buzzed. Jackson again. Don't trust the Martinez papers. They're forgeries. I can prove it. Before I could respond, Lorraine's name flashed across my screen. Then Tessa's. Then Nolan's. They're trying to damage control, I said, showing my parents the calls. They know I found everything. Let them panic, Dad said, reaching for his office phone. I'm calling security too. The office door burst open. Nolan strode in, followed by Robert Martinez himself. My heart stopped when I saw what Nolan was carrying, my old laptop. I think we all need to talk, Nolan said smoothly, about some very interesting transfers from the company's main accounts to a private one in the Cayman Islands. Transfers authorized by Ilera Winslow. What? I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. It's all here. Nolan held up my laptop. Every transaction, carefully hidden, along with some very interesting emails to offshore banks. Your daughter's been embezzling for months, Grant. My father's face went pale. That's impossible. Check for yourself. Nolan handed the laptop to Martinez. I discovered it last week. That's why I reached out to Robert, to protect the company from further damage. I stared at my husband, finally understanding. He hadn't just been stealing, he'd been setting me up as the fall guy all along. Nobody will believe this, I said, but my voice shook. They already do, Martinez said, showing us his phone. On the screen was a breaking news headline. Winslow Wellness Heir under investigation for financial misconduct. My mother gasped. Dad reached for me, but I stepped back, my mind racing. Then my phone buzzed again. Jackson, don't panic. I have backups of everything. And something else they don't know about. The board is waiting, Martinez said. They'll want answers. I looked at Nolan, at his perfect suit, his practiced concerned expression, the wedding ring he still wore like it meant something. Then I looked at my parents, seeing the doubt creeping into their eyes despite themselves. Okay, I said quietly. Let's go talk to the board. Nolan's smile flickered. He knew me well enough to be worried by my calm. As we walked to the boardroom, I sent one quick text to Jackson. Whatever you have, now's the time. Because Nolan had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about fighting back immediately. Sometimes it's about letting your enemies think they've won, right until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The boardroom doors loomed ahead. Inside, I could hear Lorraine's voice, probably already spinning her version of events. Beside me, Nolan reached for my hand, a perfect show of spousal support for our audience. I let him take it, feeling the weight of his wedding ring against my bare finger. And I smiled, thinking about how much could change in the next 5 minutes. Because Nolan wasn't the only one who knew how to play the long game. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, with 12 pairs of eyes watching my every move. Lorraine sat at one end, perfectly poised in her designer suit, while Tessa hovered near the window, pretending to check her phone. As you can see, Nolan continued his presentation. The transfers were carefully disguised. But once we traced them back to their source, he clicked to the next slide, showing my signature on various documents. My phone vibrated. Jackson. Ready when you are. Just say the word. Mrs. Winslow Mercer. Robert Martinez leaned forward. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I stood slowly, feeling Nolan's confident smirk without having to look at him. Actually, I do. But first, I'd like to ask my husband something. I turned to face Nolan. How's the weather in Zurich? His smile flickered. I don't understand. Because according to these, I pulled out my phone and projected Jackson's files onto the screen. You were there last week. With my sister-in-law. In the honeymoon suite of the Grand Hotel. Tessa dropped her phone. Lorraine's perfect posture crumbled. That's not. Nolan started, but I wasn't finished. And while you were there, you opened this account. Another screenshot appeared, using a forged power of attorney with my signature. The same signature that appears on all these documents you're so concerned about. The boardroom erupted in whispers. My father stood up, his face thunderous. There's more, I said quietly. Jackson. The boardroom screen flickered, then filled with security footage. Nolan and Tessa in various hotel lobbies. Lorraine meeting with document forgers. Bank statements showing the real money trail, all leading back to the Mercers. You ungrateful little. Lorraine lunged forward, but security was already moving in.
How?
Nolan's voice cracked. How did you? Your nephew is quite talented with computers, I said. He's been recording your family meetings for months, including the one where you planned to frame me and take control of the company. Martinez was already on his phone, presumably calling his lawyers. The board members were huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers. Ilera, Nolan reached for me, his eyes desperate. Baby, please.
We can fix this.
Everything I did for us. No. I stepped back. You did it for yourself. And your mother. And your sister. The same sister you've been sleeping with for months. Tessa let out a choked sob. It wasn't like that. We were just. Save it for the prosecutors. My father cut in. Security was already escorting them toward the door. Wait, I called out. Everyone froze. I walked up to Nolan, close enough to smell his familiar cologne. You know what the worst part is? I actually loved you. Really loved you. And you couldn't even be bothered to come up with a better password than your sister's name and birth year. His face went white. Behind him, Lorraine started screaming about lawyers and revenge, while Tessa collapsed into dramatic sobs. As they were led away, my phone buzzed one last time. Jackson. There's a recording of them planning to run tonight. Sending to the police now. And, I'm sorry about everything. I texted back. Don't be. You did the right thing. The boardroom slowly emptied, leaving just me and my parents. Mom wrapped her arms around me while Dad made calls to our legal team. I can't believe they would, Mom started. I can, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. But that's not what matters now. What matters is fixing the damage they've done to the company. And to you. Mom touched my bare ring finger. I looked out the window, watching as security escorted the Mercers to waiting police cars. Nolan looked up, our eyes meeting through the glass. For a moment, I saw a flash of the man I thought I'd married, charming, ambitious, seemingly perfect. Then he was gone, and I felt something inside me finally break free. I'll be fine, I said, turning back to my parents. But first, we have work to do. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting better. 3 days after the boardroom showdown, I sat across from Nolan in an interrogation room at the Denver Police Department. His designer suit had been replaced by orange prison scrubs, but somehow he still looked like he was the one in control. You really think this will fix anything? He asked, his voice soft. Destroying our family? Our family. I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. Was it our family when you were sleeping with your sister? Or when you and your mother planned to frame me for embezzlement? He leaned forward, chains rattling. Everything I did because I loved you too much. You were always so perfect, so untouchable. The golden Winslow heir. Don't. But you're not perfect anymore, are you? His smile was gentle, almost sad. Check your phone. As if on cue, it buzzed. A news alert. Winslow Wellness stock plummets amid family scandal. CEO Grant Winslow steps down. My hands started shaking. What did you do? Me? Nothing. But Lorraine has friends in interesting places. And Tessa, well, she always knew how to work the press. Another buzz. This time from Jackson. They're releasing everything. All of it. Even the stuff about you and Dad's gambling problem cover-up last year. The room spun. That was supposed to be buried. The time I'd used company funds to cover my father's secret gambling debts. Only 3 people knew about that. Me, Dad, and how long have you been planning this? I whispered. Since the day we met. Nolan's eyes softened. You were so busy protecting your family's legacy, you never noticed I was building a case against you. Everything backed up, documented, ready to go if you ever turned on us. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from the board, from reporters, from Dad's lawyer. Each one worse than the last. You could still fix this, Nolan said quietly. Drop the charges.
Come home.
We'll weather this storm together, like we always have. For a moment, one terrible, weak moment, I considered it. Then I remembered Jackson's recordings, the look in Tessa's eyes when she talked about Nolan, the way Lorraine had planned my downfall over Sunday dinners. No. I stood up. You don't get to win this time. I already have. He sat back, chains clinking. Your father's finished. The company's tanking. And now everyone knows the perfect Alara Winslow is just as corrupt as the rest of us. I reached for the door, but his next words stopped me cold. By the way, you never asked who sent that first anonymous letter. The one that started all this. I turned slowly. Jackson said. Jackson did what he was told. By his grandmother. Nolan's smile widened. Mom knew you'd investigate. Knew you'd find exactly what we wanted you to find. And knew you'd be so focused on exposing us, you'd never notice we were really exposing you. The truth hit me like a physical blow. We'd all been played, me, Jackson, even Tessa. This had been Lorraine's plan all along. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from my mother. Come home now. Your father's had a heart attack. I left without looking back at Nolan, but I could feel his eyes on me. In the parking lot, reporters were already gathering, shouting questions about family betrayal and financial fraud. I got in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Everything I'd done to protect my family had somehow destroyed them instead. The company was failing, Dad was in the hospital, and now everyone would know about the gambling cover-up. Lorraine had won. She'd turned my revenge into my own undoing. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, dodging reporters and camera flashes, I remembered something my father once told me. Rock bottom is just the foundation you build on. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jackson's number. Because if the Mercers had taught me anything, it was that family secrets work both ways. And I was done playing defense. I found Lorraine in her country club's private dining room, calmly sipping champagne like she hadn't just orchestrated my family's destruction. The room was empty except for us, fitting for what I was about to do. I wondered when you'd figure it out, she said, not looking up from her glass. Nolan always said you were clever. Just not clever enough. I placed my phone on the table between us, screen up. Clever enough to record everything you just said to the SEC investigator in the parking lot. Her hand trembled slightly, champagne sloshing. What are you talking about? The one you paid to bury evidence about your involvement in the Martinez deal. The same evidence Jackson's been collecting for months, ever since you first started planning this takedown. Jackson. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. He wouldn't. Your grandson's been working with the FBI's cybercrime division for 6 months, I said, watching her perfect composure crack. Turns out he's quite the prodigy. And very interested in corporate fraud cases. The dining room door opened. Tessa burst in, mascara streaked down her face. Mom, they're arresting Nolan again. Something about offshore accounts in both our names. Sit down, Tessa, I said quietly. Your mother needs to hear this too. Tessa froze, looking between us. What's going on? Show them. Jackson's voice came from behind her. He stepped into the room, laptop in hand. Show them everything. Lorraine stood up so fast her chair toppled. Jackson, whatever you think you're doing. I'm doing what you taught me, he said, setting up his laptop. Family first, right? Except I finally figured out which family deserves loyalty. The screen filled with documents, recordings, bank statements, 3 years of meticulously gathered evidence. Lorraine's master plan to use me to take control of Winslow Wellness. Tessa and Nolan's affair, carefully orchestrated to ensure maximum damage when revealed. Every manipulation, every lie, every calculated move. You were never the target, I told Tessa, whose face had gone ash-white. You were just another pawn in your mother's game. Like Nolan. Like all of us. That's not. Lorraine started, but Jackson cut her off. I have the recordings from your study, Grandma. The ones where you told Mom that Nolan was just doing his part, that sleeping with her would make the scandal more devastating. Tessa made a sound like she'd been struck. Mom, everything I did was for this family. Lorraine's voice shook. To give us what we deserve. Save it, I interrupted. The FBI has everything. So does the SEC. And in about 30 seconds, so will every major news outlet in the country. As if on cue, phones started buzzing throughout the room. Breaking news alerts lit up screens. Mercer family fraud scheme exposed. Winslow Wellness Air cleared of all charges. You can't, Lorraine whispered. I already did. I stood up. The company stock is already recovering. Dad's doctors say the stress of your little scheme probably saved his life. They caught a blocked artery during his cardiac exam. And Nolan? Well, he's agreed to testify against both of you in exchange for a reduced sentence. Tessa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Lorraine remained standing, her perfect posture finally broken. You really think you've won? She asked. No, I said, gathering my things. I think we all lost something here. The difference is I'm done playing games. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Lorraine? The country club board voted this morning. Your membership's been revoked. As I walked out, Jackson fell into step beside me. That was pretty badass, he said. You're the badass. I bumped his shoulder. FBI Cybercrime Division? Really? He grinned. Turns out there are better ways to handle family drama than embezzlement and affair. Behind us, we could hear Lorraine's carefully constructed world crumbling. But ahead of us was something better than revenge, a chance to build something new from the ashes of what we'd lost. And this time, we'd build it on truth. 1 year later, I stood in front of the mirror in my office at Winslow Wellness, adjusting my blazer before the press conference. The company had not just recovered, we'd grown stronger, more transparent, more ethical. Sometimes the worst storms clear the air. A knock at the door. They're ready for you, Jackson said, looking professional in his summer intern badge. He'd traded his hoodies for button-downs, at least during office hours. How's your mom? I asked, gathering my notes. Better. The therapy's helping. She's talking about maybe opening her own business, something small. He paused. She asked about you, actually. I nodded, remembering the last time I'd seen Tessa, at Nolan's sentencing. She looked lost, broken, but somehow more real than she ever had at Lorraine's perfectly staged family dinners. And your grandmother? Still not speaking to me. He shrugged, but I caught the hurt in his eyes. The prison psychiatrist says she's not ready to accept responsibility. The boardroom was packed when we entered. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking healthier than he had in years. Mom squeezed my hand as I passed, her smile proud and a little sad. Before we begin, I addressed the room. I want to acknowledge something. A year ago, this company almost fell apart because we forgot what matters most. Not profit margins or stock prices, but integrity.
Trust.
Real family values, not just the ones we put in our mission statement. Cameras flashed as I continued. Today, we're announcing a new initiative. The Winslow Foundation for Corporate Ethics, with a focus on preventing financial fraud and supporting whistleblowers. And I'm proud to announce our first scholarship recipient, Jackson Mercer, who'll be attending MIT's cybersecurity program this fall. The applause was genuine. Jackson ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. After the press conference, I found a familiar envelope on my desk. Inside was a letter from Nolan, postmarked from prison. I heard about the foundation, he'd written. You always were better at building things than destroying them. I'm sorry I made you choose between the two. I slipped the letter into my drawer without responding. Some bridges stay burned, and that's okay. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Proud of you, sis. T. I smiled, remembering something Dad had told me during his recovery. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the pain. It's deciding what to do with the pieces afterward. The elevator dinged, and Robert Martinez stepped out. Miss Winslow?
Got a minute?
There's something you should know about some of Lorraine's old contacts. Actually, I cut him off. I have a meeting. But our compliance team would love to hear what you know. I nodded to Jackson, who was already pulling up a recording app on his tablet. Martinez paled slightly, but followed Jackson to the conference room. Later that evening, I stood in my new apartment, watching the sunset paint Denver's skyline. The wall where Nolan's family photos once hung now displayed my degrees, awards, and a framed letter from the FBI thanking me for my cooperation in the Mercer case.
My doorbell rang.
Mom stood there with takeout and a bottle of wine. Thought you might want company tonight. How did you know? She smiled. Because it's your wedding anniversary. And because I'm your mother. We ate on my balcony, talking about everything and nothing. About Dad's golf game improving, about Jackson's college plans, about the company's future. You know, Mom said finally, revenge and redemption often look the same at first. The difference is in what you build afterward. I thought about Nolan's letter, about Tessa's text, about Lorraine's silence, about all the ways family can break and heal and transform. I'm not interested in revenge anymore, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. I'm interested in truth, in growth, in real legacy. Mom raised her glass. To new foundations. To new foundations, I echoed, watching the last light fade from the sky. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or moving on. Sometimes it's about growing beyond the person you were when you were hurt and helping others do the same. I never expected a charity gala to change my life, but that's exactly what happened on the night my fiancé's father collapsed. I was in the middle of analyzing gene sequences at my lab when Jasper's call came through. Marley, you need to come to St. Michael's Hospital right now. His voice cracked. He just went down during his speech. They're saying it might be his heart. I'm Marley Finch, and until that moment, my biggest concern had been finishing my research paper on genetic markers before the deadline. Now, as I rushed through the hospital's automatic doors 20 minutes later, that seemed laughably unimportant. The emergency room waiting area was a scene of controlled chaos. Jasper's mother, Lorraine, paced in her designer gown, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching her phone. She barely acknowledged my presence with a slight nod. Typical. Jasper stood when he saw me, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. They're running tests, he said, pulling me into a tight hug. God, Marley, One minute he was thanking everyone for supporting the foundation, and the next. He's in good hands, I assured him, though my stomach churned at the sight of his pale face. I'd never seen Jasper this shaken before. A doctor emerged from the treatment area, her expression grave. Mrs. Caldwell, your husband's condition is critical. His kidneys are failing, and we've detected severe damage to his liver. Lorraine's hand flew to her throat. But how? Reggie's always been healthy. We're still running tests, but right now our primary concern is finding a compatible donor. Given the urgency, family members would be our best option. I'll do it, Jasper said immediately. Whatever he needs. The doctor nodded. We'll need to run compatibility tests. If you'll come with me. As Jasper followed the doctor, Lorraine finally turned her full attention to me. This is a family matter, she said, her voice low and clipped. Perhaps you should head home. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was my mom, Evelyn. Everything okay, honey? You left the apartment in such a rush. Reggie Caldwell's in the hospital, I said, moving away from Lorraine. It's pretty serious. There was a long pause. Oh, just that one syllable. But something in my mother's voice made me frown. Do they know what's wrong? Organ failure. They're testing Jasper now for compatibility. Another pause. Marley, maybe you should. Dr. Anderson to emergency stat. The overhead announcement cut through our conversation. I watched as medical staff rushed toward the treatment area. Mom, I have to go. I'll call you later. I hung up just as Jasper returned, looking confused. They're saying something's weird with my blood work. They need to run more tests. My research brain kicked in. What kind of weird? I don't know. Something about blood types not matching up right. He ran his hands through his hair. I can barely think straight. As a geneticist, that detail snagged my attention. Blood types follow clear inheritance patterns. It's basic genetics. But before I could ask more questions, alarms started blaring from Reggie's room. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical terms and worried conversations. By morning, Reggie was stable but critical. Jasper had fallen asleep in an uncomfortable chair, and Lorraine had retreated to make phone calls. I sat there, watching the sunrise through the window, when Felicity, Jasper's aunt, arrived. She took one look at the scene and went pale. "How bad?" she whispered. "He needs a transplant," I said. "They're having trouble finding a match." Felicity's eyes darted to Jasper's sleeping form, then back to me. "No match yet." Something about her tone made me look at her more closely. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Is there something I should know?" I asked quietly. She straightened her shoulders. "No, of course not. I should go check on my sister." But as she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed the tip of something much bigger. Between my mother's odd reaction, Jasper's blood work issues, and now Felicity's strange behavior, my scientific mind was starting to piece together a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. After 36 hours at the hospital, Jasper finally agreed to come home and rest. The drive back to our apartment was silent, heavy with unspoken worries. I kept thinking about those blood test results, but every time I opened my mouth to ask about them, I saw the exhaustion in Jasper's face and stopped myself. Our apartment felt different somehow. The engagement photos on the walls seemed to mock us with their carefree smiles. Jasper headed straight for the shower while I called my mom. "I'm coming over," she said before I could protest. "You both need a proper meal, and I've got leftover lasagna." 20 minutes later, my mother arrived with enough food to feed an army. She took one look at Jasper, freshly showered but still looking lost, and went into full nurse mode. "Sit," she commanded. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't from a vending machine?" Jasper managed a weak smile. "I honestly can't remember, Evelyn." As my mother busied herself in the kitchen, I noticed how her hands shook slightly while handling the dishes. Something was off. Mom was usually rock solid in a crisis. It's what made her such a great nurse. "The doctors say Dad's stable for now," Jasper said, picking at his food. "But without a compatible donor." My mother dropped a fork. The clatter made us both jump. "Sorry," she muttered, but her face had gone pale. "Just tired. Long shift yesterday." Before I could question her reaction, Jasper's phone rang. It was Lorraine. "Yes, Mother," he said, his voice tightening. "No, I don't think— Yes, I understand, but—" He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fine. We'll be there in an hour." "What's wrong?" I asked after he hung up. "Mother's organizing a family meeting at their house. Says we need to discuss arrangements while Dad's incapacitated." He looked at me apologetically. "She wants you there too." The Caldwell mansion always made me feel small, but today it felt suffocating. Lorraine had gathered the family in the formal living room, all crystal chandeliers and antique furniture that nobody actually sat on. Felicity was already there, perched on the edge of a Victorian settee like she might bolt at any moment. She barely met my eyes when we walked in. "Jasper, darling." Lorraine swooped in, air-kissing his cheeks. "And Marley." Her pause before my name spoke volumes. I heard voices from the study, Lorraine's lawyer, apparently, discussing power of attorney. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but paused in the hallway when I heard my name. "That girl is becoming a problem," Lorraine was saying. "A scientist? From that background?" "Really, Felicity, you know what Reggie would want for Jasper." "Lorraine, now isn't the time." "It's exactly the time. With Reggie incapacitated, we need to protect the family's interests. That includes making sure Jasper doesn't make any unfortunate decisions." My hands clenched into fists. I dealt with Lorraine's thinly veiled contempt for years, but this was different. This felt calculated. "There you are." Jasper's voice made me jump. He frowned at my expression. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from the hospital lab. I'd called in a favor from a colleague to look at Jasper's blood work. "Results don't make sense," the text read. "Patient's blood type impossible given listed parents. Might want to double-check family history." My stomach dropped. I looked at Jasper, at his familiar features that I'd always thought came from Reggie. But now, "Marley." Jasper touched my arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," I lied, pocketing my phone. "Maybe we should go home." "Not yet." Lorraine appeared in the hallway. The lawyer needs to discuss the Foundation's succession plans. Jasper, come with me. Marley, perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting out here. As they disappeared into the study, I caught Felicity watching me. The guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Something was very wrong with the Caldwell family tree, and I was beginning to suspect it had roots in my own past. The scientist in me needed answers, but the woman who loved Jasper was terrified of what those answers might reveal. The lab results haunted me for days. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work, and definitely couldn't look Jasper in the eye without feeling like I was betraying him somehow. Finally, I called Tess and asked her to meet me at our usual coffee spot. "You look like hell," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I pushed my laptop toward her. "Look at these blood type results. Tell me I'm not crazy." Tess, a medical researcher herself, studied the screen. Her eyebrows shot up. "This can't be right. If these are Jasper's results, and Reggie's his father." She trailed off, frowning. "Exactly. It's genetically impossible." "Holy shit." Tess leaned back. "Does Jasper know? How am I supposed to tell him?" "Hey honey, by the way, the man you're trying to save might not actually be your father." The barista brought our drinks, and I noticed my hands shaking as I reached for my cup. "There's more," I said quietly. "My mom's been acting weird ever since Reggie collapsed, and yesterday I found this." I pulled out an old photograph I discovered while searching through Mom's storage boxes. It showed a much younger version of her at what looked like a company party. She was standing next to Reggie Caldwell, and they were looking at each other in a way that made my stomach turn. "No way," Tess whispered. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lorraine about wedding planning. She'd been oddly insistent about moving up the date, claiming we should do it while Reggie was still well enough to attend. "She knows something," I said. "Lorraine's been pushing hard to either break us up or rush us to the altar." "Why?" "Maybe she's worried you'll figure it out." Tess took another look at the photo. "When was this taken?" 30 years ago. Mom was working as a nurse at Reggie's first store location. Just then my phone rang. It was Jasper. "You need to come to the hospital," he said, his voice tight. "Mother's trying to convince Dad to change his will while he's on medication. It's getting ugly." I arrived to find Lorraine and Felicity in a heated argument outside Reggie's room. Jasper stood between them, looking lost. "He's not thinking clearly," Lorraine was saying. "The medication is keeping him alive," Felicity shot back. "You can't use that as an excuse to." They fell silent when they saw me. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Family matters," she said pointedly. "I am family," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "Or I will be soon." "Will you?" Lorraine's smile was razor-sharp. "Are you sure about that?" "Mother," Jasper warned, but I was already moving past them into Reggie's room. He looked worse than before, pale against the hospital sheets. His eyes opened when I approached. "Marley," he said weakly, "I need to tell you." "Not now, darling," Lorraine interrupted, suddenly beside me. "You need your rest." But Reggie grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Your mother," he started. "That's enough." Lorraine's voice cracked like a whip. Felicity stepped forward. "Lorraine, maybe it's time. Get out." Lorraine pointed at the door. "All of you out." As we filed into the hallway, I caught Felicity's arm. What was he trying to tell me about my mother? She pulled away, but not before I saw tears in her eyes. "Ask Evelyn about the summer of '93, she whispered. "Ask her about the company picnic." Back in the hallway, Jasper was staring at his phone. "The lab sent over more test results," he said. "They're saying..." He looked up at me, confusion clouding his features. "They're saying I can't be a donor because there's no genetic match." "How is that possible?" Behind him, I saw Lorraine's face go white. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew she'd been keeping this secret for 30 years. The truth was right there, waiting to destroy everything, and I was the one holding the match. I spent 3 days avoiding Jasper's calls while I tried to figure out what to do with the truth burning a hole in my pocket. The old photo of Mom and Reggie sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, while dozens of unanswered messages filled my phone. Finally, Jasper showed up at my lab. "You can't just disappear on me," he said, his voice tight with hurt. "Not with everything that's happening." I couldn't meet his eyes. Instead, I stared at the genetic analysis on my computer screen. the one that proved what I'd suspected since that day in the hospital. "Talk to me, Marley. What's going on?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Lorraine's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, but seconds later, a text appeared. "We need to discuss what you think you know." "Why is my mother texting you?" Jasper asked, frowning at my phone. "Because she's trying to protect her lies," I muttered, then immediately regretted it when I saw his expression. "What lies?" The lab door opened, and Tess walked in, freezing when she saw us. "Oh, sorry, I didn't." "No, stay," I said quickly. Having her there made me braver somehow. "I need to show Jasper something anyway." My hands shook as I pulled up the blood type analysis. "The reason you can't be a donor for Reggie. It's not just a simple mismatch." "Marley," Tess warned, but I couldn't stop now. "These markers show a complete genetic impossibility. According to this data, Reggie can't be your biological father." The silence that followed was deafening. Jasper stared at the screen, then at me, his face draining of color. "That's impossible," he whispered. "There must be a mistake." I ran the tests 3 times. I reached for the old photograph. And then I found this. Jasper took the photo, his hands trembling slightly. "When was this?" "Summer of '93. 9 months before you were born." The lab door burst open. Lorraine stood there, breathing hard like she'd run all the way from the parking lot. "That's enough," she snapped. "Jasper, come with me." "Now, did you know?" Jasper's voice was barely audible. "All this time, did you know?" Lorraine's face hardened. "This isn't the place. It's a simple question, Mother. Did you know?" "Everything I did was to protect you," she said, her composure cracking. "To protect our family name. By lying to me my entire life?" Jasper's laugh was hollow. "Who is my real father?" Lorraine's eyes darted to the photo in his hands, then to me. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Just like your mother, always destroying everything she touches." "What does my mother have to do with this?" I demanded, but something in Lorraine's expression made my blood run cold. "Ask her about Thomas Bennett," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Ask her what really happened the night he disappeared." The name hit me like a physical blow. Thomas Bennett, I'd seen it before in old newspaper clippings I'd found while researching the Caldwell family history. He'd been Reggie's business partner until he vanished without a trace 30 years ago. Jasper looked between us, his world visibly crumbling. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. "Jas, wait." I reached for him, but he pulled away. "Don't," he said. "Just don't." After he left, Lorraine turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You wanted the truth? Congratulations. Now we all get to live with it." She walked out, leaving me standing there with Tess, the weight of unspoken secrets threatening to suffocate me. "Thomas Bennett," I said quietly. "Why does that name feel important?" Tess was already typing on her computer. "Because according to this old article, he was last seen leaving a meeting with Reggie Caldwell and a nurse named Evelyn Finch. My mother. The night before she left town, pregnant with me." The truth wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was dangerous. I found my mother in her garden, methodically pulling weeds like her world wasn't about to implode. The newspaper clipping about Thomas Bennett felt heavy in my pocket. "Who was he?" I asked without preamble. Mom's hands stilled in the dirt. She didn't turn around. "Who?" "Thomas Bennett. Reggie's missing business partner. The man who disappeared the night before you left town, pregnant with me." The trowel in her hand clattered to the ground. When she finally faced me, her expression was one I'd never seen before. Raw fear. "Where did you hear that name?" Lorraine Caldwell seemed pretty interested in what you might know about his disappearance. Mom stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "Come inside." In her kitchen, she pulled a dusty box from the top shelf of her pantry. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to Thomas Bennett. "He was your father," she said quietly. "And he was going to leave everything, his family, his share of the business, to be with us." Was. Her hands trembled as she sorted through the letters. "The night he disappeared, he was meeting with Reggie to sign over his part of the company. I was supposed to meet them afterward, but when I got there..." She swallowed hard. "There was blood in Reggie's office. Not much, but enough." My phone buzzed, another message from Jasper. We need to talk. About everything. Did Reggie kill him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know. Mom's eyes filled with tears. But Lorraine was there that night too. She saw me outside the office. The next day, she came to my apartment with an envelope full of cash and a warning. Leave town or she'd tell the police I was involved. So you ran. I ran to protect you. She grabbed my hand. Marley, you need to stop digging. These people, they're dangerous when they're cornered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Felicity. Meet me at the hospital. There's something you need to see. I have to go, I said, standing. Marley, please. Did you ever think that maybe the truth would protect me better than lies? At the hospital, I found Felicity in Reggie's room. He was asleep, machines beeping steadily around him. Look at this, she said, handing me a folder. Inside were more blood test results, not Jasper's but Reggie's. These patterns, I muttered, scanning the data. They're similar too. To yours, Felicity finished. I had the lab run a comparison. Marley, Reggie isn't just Jasper's uncle. He's your father. The room spun. That's impossible. My father was Thomas Bennett. That's what Evelyn believed. But Reggie, he and your mother. It was before Thomas disappeared. A harsh laugh from the doorway made us both jump. Lorraine stood there, her perfect makeup unable to hide her fury. So now you know, she said. The great Reggie Caldwell, sleeping with his partner's girlfriend while playing the devoted family man. And you, she pointed at me, you're the living proof of his betrayal. Does Jasper know? I asked. Know what? That his fiancée is his cousin? That his whole life is built on lies. Lorraine's smile was cruel. Not yet. But imagine what it would do to him. You can't. Can't what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you wanted? She stepped closer. Here's the deal. Walk away from Jasper, from all of this, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family they're really part of. Behind her, Reggie's monitors started beeping faster. His eyes were open, watching us. Enough, he rasped. But the truth was already unraveling, spinning out of control. I looked at my father, not Thomas Bennett, but Reggie Caldwell, and saw 30 years of secrets threatening to destroy everyone I loved. The question wasn't whether to tell Jasper anymore. The question was, who would break his heart first? The hospital room felt smaller with each passing second as Reggie struggled to sit up in his bed. Lorraine moved to stop him, but he waved her away. Get out, he wheezed. Both of you. I need to speak with Marley alone. Lorraine's face twisted. You're not thinking clearly. Now. His voice carried the authority of a man who'd spent decades giving orders. After they left, silence stretched between us like a chasm. I looked at his monitors. Anywhere but his face. I should have told you years ago, he finally said. Which part? That you're my father? Or that you killed Thomas Bennett? His heart rate spiked on the monitor. Is that what Evelyn thinks? That I killed him? Did you? No. He closed his eyes. But I know who did. Before he could continue, Jasper appeared in the doorway. His face was ashen, his phone clutched in his hand. I just got the strangest call from Mother, he said. Something about DNA tests and family secrets. His eyes moved between us. What's going on? My throat closed up. Behind Jasper, I saw Lorraine smirking from the hallway. Son, Reggie started. Don't. Jasper's voice cracked. Just tell me the truth. All of it. Reggie's monitors began beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, checking his vitals. You need to leave, she said. His blood pressure's too high. Not until someone explains. The machines erupted in alarm. Reggie clutched his chest, gasping. Medical staff flooded the room, pushing us into the hallway. Code blue, someone shouted. Jasper grabbed my arm. What did you do? I didn't. First the blood tests, then Mother's call, now this? His fingers dug into my skin. What are you trying to prove? That everything you think you know is a lie. The words burst out before I could stop them. His grip loosened. What? Reggie isn't your father, Jazz. He's mine. The color drained from his face. Behind us, the medical team was still working on Reggie, their shouts echoing through the corridor. That's impossible, Jasper whispered. The genetic tests prove it. And there's more. Thomas Bennett. Stop. He backed away. Just stop. Jasper, please. We're cousins. His laugh was hollow. All this time, were you investigating me? Using your science to what? Expose my family. I was trying to understand my own family. Well, congratulations. His voice was ice. You've destroyed both of them. From the hospital room came the long, steady tone of a flatline. Time of death, 9:47 p.m., someone announced. Jasper's face crumpled. He turned and ran down the hallway as doctors emerged from Reggie's room, shaking their heads. Lorraine appeared at my side. Are you happy now? She hissed. You've killed him, just like your mother killed Thomas. I spun to face her. What did you say? Oh, you didn't know that part? Her smile was venomous. Ask dear Evelyn about the syringe they found in Thomas's office. The one with her fingerprints on it. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Don't trust Lorraine. She's the one who killed Thomas. I have proof. But when I looked up, Lorraine was already walking away, her heels clicking on the hospital floor like a countdown. Behind me, they were covering Reggie's body. My father, the man who might have finally told me the truth about that night 30 years ago. I stood alone in the hallway, caught between my dead father and my fleeing almost husband, while 30 years of lies unraveled around me. Somewhere in this mess was the truth about Thomas Bennett's death, but finding it might cost me everything I had left. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I know what really happened that night. Meet me at the old factory. Come alone. The choice was simple. Walk away and lose everything, or dive deeper and risk destroying what little remained of both families. I headed for my car. Some truths are worth burning for. The old factory loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like jagged teeth. I killed my car's headlights and checked my phone one last time. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Tess, and a single text from Jasper. Don't do anything stupid. Too late for that. A figure emerged from the shadows near the loading dock. Felicity, still wearing her hospital clothes. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. You know what happened to Thomas Bennett. She nodded toward the rusted door. Better show you. Inside, moonlight filtered through the holes in the roof, casting strange shadows across abandoned machinery. Felicity led me to an old office, pulling a weathered envelope from her purse. Lorraine didn't just kill Thomas, she said. She killed your father too. Reggie died of organ failure. After 30 years of slow poisoning. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. I found these in her safe. Receipts for something called thallium. She's been adding it to Reggie's tea for decades. Why? Because he was going to leave her for your mother. Another voice, Lorraine's, cut through the darkness. She stepped out from behind a column, holding something that glinted in the moonlight. A gun. Always the dramatic reveal. Felicity? Lorraine's laugh was brittle. Couldn't just let the past stay buried? Like you buried Thomas? I asked. Thomas was a mistake. He found out what I was planning for Reggie and threatened to expose me. She moved closer, the gun steady. But Reggie? That was art. Slow, untraceable. Until you started digging. Footsteps echoed behind me. Jasper appeared, his face a mask of horror. Mother. Jasper. Lorraine's composure cracked. You weren't supposed to be here. I followed Marley. His voice was hollow. I don't know what I thought. But not this. Everything I did was for you, Lorraine insisted. To protect your inheritance, your future. By killing my father? His laugh was bitter. Which one? The man who raised me, or my real father? Thomas was weak, Lorraine spat. He would have ruined everything. Just like she's trying to do. The gun swung toward me. You want to know the truth, Jasper? Felicity pulled out another paper. Your real father was Thomas Bennett. And Lorraine killed him the night he was going to tell you. The gun wavered. Shut up. That's why she hates Marley so much, Felicity continued. Because Marley is living proof of what Reggie did, sleeping with Evelyn while Thomas was falling for Lorraine. Stop. Lorraine's finger tightened on the trigger. I saw it then. The same desperate need for control that had driven her to poison her husband, to kill Thomas, to manipulate everyone around her for decades. You can't shoot all of us, I said quietly. And you can't bury this truth. Watch me. She aimed at my heart. The gunshot was deafening. Lorraine screamed, the gun flying from her hand. Blood bloomed on her shoulder. My mother stepped from the shadows, holding a small revolver. 30 years ago, you made me run, she said. Not this time. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Jasper moved toward his mother, but stopped, his face conflicted. I called them, he said. When I followed Marley. I recorded everything. Lorraine lunged for her dropped gun. Another shot rang out, this time from a police officer entering through the back door. As they led Lorraine away in handcuffs, Jasper turned to me. We're not cousins. No. But we're still tangled in this mess. Yes. He looked at the factory's broken windows, at the moonlight painting shadows across 3 decades of secrets. I don't know if I can. I know, I said. Neither do I. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just shows you how trapped you really are. Behind us, evidence teams began documenting 30 years of carefully constructed lies. Ahead of us lay the wreckage of 2 families bound by blood, betrayal, and a truth that none of us had wanted to find. 6 months after Lorraine's arrest, I stood in front of Reggie's grave with a handful of white roses. The autumn wind scattered leaves across the fresh dirt of Thomas Bennett's newly discovered remains, finally laid to rest in the plot next door. Ready? Jasper's voice was soft behind me. I nodded, placing the roses on both graves. We hadn't spoken much since that night at the factory, both needing time to process the wreckage of our shared history. But yesterday, he'd called. They're reading the will today, he said now, hands in his pockets. You should be there. The lawyer's office felt too small for the weight of everything that had happened. Felicity sat quietly in the corner while my mother held my hand. The envelope the lawyer produced bore Reggie's signature, dated just hours before his death. To my children, he began, both the one I raised and the one I should have. I squeezed Mom's hand as the lawyer detailed Reggie's final wishes. The eco-friendly store chain would be split equally between Jasper and me. But it was the second envelope that changed everything. In the event of my death, the lawyer read, this evidence should be turned over to the authorities. Inside were documents proving Lorraine had been embezzling from the company for years, funneling money into offshore accounts. The final piece of revenge from a dying man. He knew, Jasper said quietly, about the poisoning. He was gathering evidence all along. After the reading, Jasper and I walked through the park where we'd had our first date. The autumn colors reminded me of that night, before we knew we were part of a tragedy 30 years in the making. I found my father's journals, Jasper said suddenly. Thomas Bennett's, I mean. He wrote about you, about hoping to be there when you were born. My throat tightened. What are we supposed to do with all this? Maybe it's not about doing anything. He stopped walking. Maybe it's about accepting that our parents were just people, making terrible decisions out of love and fear and jealousy. A text buzzed on my phone. News from the prosecutor. Lorraine had accepted a plea deal. 20 years for 2 murders and 3 decades of poisoning her husband. She's not contesting anything, I told Jasper. Good. His voice was firm. Some truths shouldn't stay buried. We reached the pond where he'd proposed, back when our biggest worry was whether his mother would approve of my dress. I've been thinking, he said, about that genetic research project you started before all this. The one about inherited traits. I smiled despite myself. Bit close to home now. Maybe that's why it matters. He turned to face me. We're not our parents' mistakes, Marley. We're what we choose to do with the truth. And what do we choose? Instead of answering, he pulled out a small box. Not a ring this time, but a key. The old lab at the store's headquarters, he explained. We could turn it into a genetic research facility. Use our inheritance to help people understand their own stories. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But maybe it was something better, a way to build something new from the ashes of our shared past. Partners, he asked. Partners, I agreed. Later that night, I found one last letter from Reggie, hidden in the will's envelope. The truth is both poison and cure, he'd written. Choose wisely which one you make it. I looked at the key in my hand, thinking about DNA and destiny, about choices and chances. Jasper and I might never fully untangle the roots of our family tree, but maybe we could grow something new, something honest, from its twisted branches. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying the past. Sometimes it's about building a future strong enough to bear its weight. I picked up my phone and called Jasper. It was time to begin again.